Ja, guten Morgen, meine Damen und Herren. Mein Name ist Minjae Sur und im Namen von Maier Vidorno Altios und unserem Partner in Japan, Herrn Yasushi Hasegawa, heiße ich Sie herzlich willkommen zu unserem heutigen Webinar über den japanischen Markt. Wir freuen uns sehr über die große Resonanz. Wir haben bereits 65 Teilnehmer heute und genau. Da einige vielleicht von Ihnen noch nicht genau wissen, wer wir sind, einige Worte zu uns. Maier Vidorno Altios ist mit 36 Büros in 22 Ländern weltweit vertreten und wir bieten Unternehmen aus dem deutschsprachigen Raum verschiedene und auch individuell angepasste Lösungen für die Internationalisierung. Das beginnt damit von der Ausarbeitung der internationalen Wachstumsstrategie über die Gründung und den operativen Betrieb der Auslandsniederlassung mit der täglichen Compliance-Verwaltung natürlich, inklusive Personal, Buchhaltung, Steuern und so weiter, bis hin zu grenzübergreifenden M&A-Projekten. Und bei all diesen Schritten unterstützen wir Sie und begleiten Sie. Gerne können Sie uns jederzeit kontaktieren, wenn Sie internationale Projekte und Vorhaben mit uns besprechen wollen. Und mehr Informationen finden Sie auf unserer Webseite. Nun zum heutigen Webinar. Da unser vergangenes Webinar über den japanischen Markt sehr, sehr positive Resonanzen erhalten hat, gibt es heute eine Neuauflage mit einigen Updates zum japanischen Markt. Jetzt, nachdem die Corona-Zeit ein bisschen vergangen ist und welche neuen Chancen und welche Challenges es aktuell gibt. Ganz kurz zum Organisatorischen. Die meisten von Ihnen werden wahrscheinlich schon bei Webinaren teilgenommen haben. Trotzdem kurz der Hinweis. Sie sind alle im Zuhörermodus. Das heißt, die Mikrofone sind stumm geschaltet. Sie können trotzdem jedoch über die Chatbox Fragen stellen, gerne während der ganzen Session. Und weitestgehend werden dann diese Fragen beantwortet. Am Ende gibt es die Q&A-Session. Da wird dann unser Referent diese beantworten. Zudem wird das Webinar auch aufgezeichnet. Das heißt, wenn Sie im Nachgang nochmal über verschiedene Punkte nochmal nachlesen wollen, können wir Ihnen diese gerne zuschicken. So, dann wechseln wir jetzt ins Englische und hiermit übergebe ich das Wort an unseren Kollegen Herrn Yasushi Hasegawa. And Mr. Hasegawa, I am passing the word to you now.
Thank you, Mimi, for your kind introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Yasushi Hasegawa from Financial Partners, which is a market entry consulting firm focusing on Japan, and also a strategic partner of M&V and the Altios Group. So it's a great pleasure for me to share my knowledge about market entry into Japan, and I hope you can enjoy my presentation and get some new insights and ideas how to be successful in the Japanese market. So I'd like to start with a brief introduction of our firm. We are based in Tokyo, Japan, and established in 2008, which was the worst timing, but we achieved surviving. And now we have roughly 30 people, and we have worked on over 350 international projects in our 14 years history. And most of our clients from the US and Germany and its neighboring countries like Switzerland, Netherlands, and partly some are from other English-speaking countries. As a market entry consultant, we of course do the market research or establish a market entry strategy, but our main function is implementation of sales and marketing in Japan. And the background is most of our clients are sort of small to mid-sized companies. So just giving advice wouldn't be enough for them. So that we usually do sales and marketing activities in Japan on behalf of our clients on a retainer base. Sometimes we keep working for the same client for several years until they have been successful enough. You can see some of our clients on this slide. Some are some governmental body, the the U.S. states government, Pennsylvania, Virginia. At the same time, we have many clients in industrial goods and consumer goods sectors. And partly, we sometimes work for Japanese companies like these guys on their global expansion. So this is our short briefing about our company. And now I'd like to start with the first section, why Japan? Because Japan is a very tricky market. Japan could be the best destination for some types of companies, but it could be worst on the planet. So you have to be very careful if your product is a good fit with Japan. Sometimes, your success rate would be almost zero. So please be careful. So I'd like to start with some key figures which highlight how Japan is. The key figures are population. It's still large, 125 million, but the problem is it's declining rapidly, like 500,000 per year. So it sounds like one small city is disappearing. So it's affecting a lot on our economy, and because we are losing both number of consumers and workforce at the same time. So this is one reason of our economic stagnant in the past 20 to 30 years. And GDP is still ranked world number 3. Still big, but the problem is growth rate is almost nothing. Even before COVID, our economic growth rate was usually between 0 and 1%. And I calculated the growth rate over 150 countries with the data provided by the World Bank. And unfortunately, Japan was ranked worst in the world. So please do not expect economic growth in Japan. And now I'm going to explain two shocking figures. The next one is the GDP per capita, or GDP per person. So Japan was ranked world number 2 20 years ago, but now it's ranked world 24th or 5th, just above Italy. So Japan was a rich country in the past, but not anymore. So sometimes people have wrong expectation. Japan is a rich country. Japan has many, rich people, but it's wrong. It was true 20 years ago, but it has changed dramatically. Another problem is median age. Japan is the second oldest country in the world. It's getting, older and older. The number one oldest country is Luxembourg. I guess many rich old people gather there, but among big countries, Japan is the oldest. So I have to say, Japan is getting poorer and poorer and older and older. So this is the reality of Japan. So I hope some of you guys are still interested in Japan, even though I'm telling you very negative information, honestly. Then this is our GDP chart. So Japan was leading the global economy in 1980s and until mid-90s, but like this. No growth in the past 30 years. And also we had the terrible situation between 2008 and 2013 or 14, because our economic crisis happened in 2008. In addition, the big earthquake happened in 2011. So this period was terrible. Nobody was interested in Japan, but the economy was recovering from 2014 or 15, but now COVID hit the economy of Japan as the same as other countries, and this year probably Japan shows a positive figure in growth rate, but still we need one more year to be back to the normal level in terms of GDP. And China was like this. Actually, their GDP has been almost double of Japan or more. So this is a reality of Japan. And this is a good example how the domestic Japan market is. It's the chart of the number of cars sold in Japan. Actually, in early 90s, 8 million units of cars were sold, but now it was like 5 million. So it's a huge drop. Actually, American famous car brand Ford withdrew from Japan a few years ago because the domestic market of Japan is dying. But I have a question. Do you think the Japanese automotive companies are doing well or are doing badly? There's some secret. This is the domestic sales. It's flat, but Japan exports the same amount to other countries. So that's why domestic production remains at this 10 million units level, probably one of the biggest automotive industry in the world. At the same time, many Japanese companies expand their overseas production and overseas sales. So this is our overseas production. So globally, still Japanese automotive companies are growing steadily, and 1/3 of the global market is dominated by Japanese brand. So when you think about the market entry into Japan, you should not focus on the domestic market, but you have to consider the side of industry of the Japanese companies outside of Japan. This is our top 20 manufacturers in terms of increase in net sales from 2005 to 2014. The data is somewhat old, but remember, right? Told you that period was very terrible for Japan due to the economic crisis and the big earthquake. However, so many Japanese manufacturers recorded a big increase in their net sales during that period. So actually, the domestic market was terrible. However, they made their growth. The secret is here: overseas sales ratio. For example, Toyota earned roughly 80% from outside Japan, and 86% for Honda. So most of Japanese manufacturers nowadays don't rely on the domestic market. So they are mainly growing outside Japan. So if you are suppliers selling your parts or components to big Japanese manufacturers, you should not analyze the Japanese domestic market because their main business doesn't exist in Japan. So you have to consider the opportunity to have a business with Japanese companies outside Japan. And you can find very interesting research on this slide. This research was done by Ahaka Japan a few years ago. They distributed the questionnaires to their membership in Japan, German companies, Japan subsidiaries. They asked, which is bigger, A or B? B is simple, the sales from Japanese companies in Japan. And A is sales from Japanese companies outside Japan. For example, A is sales from Toyota USA, Toyota India, Toyota China, and B is sales from Toyota headquarters in Japan. And surprisingly, almost half companies answered A is greater than B. So they are doing business development in Japan, but they are earning more outside Japan. And more surprisingly, 20% answered A is 4 times bigger than B. So our domestic market is dying. However, many German companies are seeking opportunities in Japan because of this reason. they are not interested in the Japanese market, but they are interested in developing Japanese customers globally. So this is the reason why Japan is still attractive country for some types of suppliers. And you might think, you can directly sell to Toyota Europe directly, but it may not work. So if you are selling cheap products or normal commodity parts tools, you can directly sell to the subsidiary of a Japanese company in a local market like in India, China, Europe. However, if you are selling important products, for example, autonomous driving software for automotive industry, some eco-friendly engine filter, or some sensor for safety driving, those important parts are chosen by a decision maker in Japan. So in such case, you have to do sales activities in Japan, and then you will have a chance to deliver to Japanese subsidiaries or subsidiaries of Japanese companies outside Japan. In addition, if you do business development in other Asian countries, I believe you often encounter Japanese companies in other Asian countries. So Japan is our #1 or #2 investor in other Asian countries. So if you do business development in India, for example, here, you can often encounter Japanese company. But a decision maker doesn't exist there. So you have to do something in Japan. So this is another bonus if you have been successful in Japan. So let me wrap up the first section. I would recommend Japan to foreign companies in general, especially for the case you are selling consumer goods. Japan is a tough market, old and poor. Many famous companies have withdrawn from Japan, and the last year or 2 years ago, the biggest cosmetics company in Europe made a decision to withdraw from Japan. So their skincare products are not available in Japan anymore. So it's really tough market. So you should choose other countries like India, China, Singapore, if you are selling consumer goods. But we recommend Japan to industrial suppliers. So still advanced engineering sectors are growing, like automotive, construction machinery, medical device, automation, robotics, electronics. So I believe Japan is one of the most attractive markets for such kind of suppliers. And also, Japan is a good market for healthcare and alternative energy. Obviously, aging of society is the reason of the big opportunity in healthcare sector, and we had to stop a nuclear power plant due to the big earthquake. So alternative energy is demanded in Japan. So now you have an idea. Japan could be a good destination for you or not good. So if you really think Japan is not a good market for you, you can leave this webinar right now. I don't think it's implied, but I hope still many of you guys are interested in Japan. And in this session, I'd like to explain some organizational culture of a Japanese company. They have a very different logic how to work, so from European or American companies. So I'd like you to understand their culture first. So I'd like to start with a very famous concept, HR system in Japan, which are lifetime employment and seniority wage system. So usually, most of Japanese new graduates start working at the age of 22 or 23. They start working as of April 1st together. So, and they usually have a few weeks training. So it's like more procurement, not recruitment, or it's like a recruitment of a military service, like a boot camp of a U.S. Marine. So it's somewhat different from other countries, and the salary would be like this. And if you are promoted, salary could be like this. So your performance doesn't matter on your salary. So, and you have to be over 40 years to be promoted to a manager, and probably 50 years to be promoted to a senior manager, especially in the big company. So, so their working way is very different. So achieving great goals or performing very well would be meaningless for many of them. So this is a reality. That's why usually they don't take risks. So they prefer doing nothing in some cases. So they hesitate to replace existing products by yours because it's risk. So you have to understand their way of thinking based on this kind of very unique or strange HR system. And this is our organizational culture. Japanese love titles. It's really hierarchical. Maybe same with China and South Korea. And but the decision-making system is somewhat different from other countries. I usually say it's a middle up and down. So middle managers usually are key people to make a decision, but they don't have a right or authority to make a decision on their own responsibility. They usually have to make a consensus with lower level. Hey, what do you think about this product? Or yeah, middle managers have to talk to his team. At the same time, they have to get the approval from top management. So that's why Japanese managers are super busy. So sometimes our foreign clients ask me, who is a decision maker in Japan? But I have to say, there's no clear decision maker. Probably this manager will be a key person, but the decision should be made on consensus base with his subordinate and some bosses. So that is the reality of the decision making system of Japan. Sometimes foreign companies request us to arrange meetings with CEO, COO, CTO, high-level people, but I have to say it's very difficult. At the same time, it's meaningless because they do nothing. The top management is like a sinecure or ownable position. They have their own private room and the car, secretary, but they do nothing. So I don't say it's same in all the companies, but this is the typical structure of a big Japanese firm. So if you do sales activities, you have to meet key middle manager, and at the same time, you try to support him to persuade his bosses and his team. And I'd like to explain the business culture a bit more. So this is a famous framework to compare different culture. So you can see the score of Japan, Germany, and the United States. And Japan has a super high score in the 3 dimensions: masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, and long-term orientation. So masculinity means competitive. Our society is super competitive, so men are supposed to sacrifice his personal life and his family, so they don't go home. So it's a very masculine world, and this masculinity score is usually very low in Latin America or Latin Europe. People value private life, friends, family. So I envy you guys. So, but Japanese companies are like this, super masculine, super competitive. They don't go home until they have done their job. And another high score is high uncertainty avoidance. So I think it's our highest in the world. So people don't take risks in Japan. So it's really tough when you try to sell your new high-tech products to your Japanese customers. And another high score is in long-term orientation. It's almost same with Germany. So people prefer long-term partnership with suppliers. I believe it's same in Germany. So those three barriers are tough entry barriers for you. So imagine the situation. Your customer prefers long-term orientation with their existing supplier, local Japanese supplier. And most of them don't like take risks. And your competitors are super masculine. They are obedient to their customers. If a customer says, please make this by the end of the week, so probably they wouldn't sleep if they don't have time. So this is the reason why Japan is a very tough market to enter. And this culture was made by harakiri, or committing suicide. Surprisingly, this culture and at the same time, this culture is super masculine. So, of course, it doesn't exist anymore, but we still have this culture mentally. So, especially in the big organization. So now I would like to explain more detail of marketing and sales activities in Japan. The first important aspect is language. You should not send emails in English. They ignore, or your English emails directly go to their spam folder. And needless to say, you should not send in German. And yeah, or also you should not make phone calls in English. It just makes them feel uncomfortable. And all documents must be written in Japanese, and all services must be provided in Japanese. So this is the reality. Of course, if you work with an importer should have a few English speakers at least. So your product is very simple. It doesn't require high-tech service. You can sell it through an importer, but services should be provided in the Japanese language. And this is our sales process. It's a comparison between open and flexible country and Japan. I don't say the country name of open and flexible country. In such country, it's easy to arrange a meeting, a first meeting, open discussion, speaking blah, 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 blah. And then probably you will have technical discussion and negotiation. Probably you can reach an agreement in short time. However, on the implementation, there must be a lot of going forward and back forth. Sometimes they cancel the contract. Sometimes after making an agreement, they try to change the scope of work. So it happens in the open and flexible country. However, Japan is very opposite. It's super, energy consuming to reach a right person, because the culture is conservative, and they usually try to reject such kind of meeting offer. So Japanese salesperson have to be super patient. They are supposed to keep making phone calls again and again, and sending emails again and again. And then after reaching the right person, they prefer a lot of technical Q&A on email basis. Most Japanese don't value speaking blah, 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 blah. So sometimes you have to process tens of technical Q&As before the first meeting with our right person. And in the first meeting, it's just a greeting, usually. Most Japanese prefer step-by-step approach. So you should not expect some decision in the early round. And then you will have a lot of technical discussion, and at the same time, they will have a lot of internal negotiation because they have to make consensus in their organization. And actually, it takes a lot of time to reach an agreement with a Japanese company, especially with a big one. However, there's a good advantage. After agreement, everything goes smoothly. So I think the speed of vaccination in Japan is a good example. Actually, it took a lot of time for preparation of vaccination. And Japan was criticized. The speed of vaccination was very slow. However, once it has started, every day, a few million people were vaccinated. So it takes a lot of time before implementation, but very fast on implementation. So this is the advantage of Japan. However, you will be frustrated this long sales communication process. And it's a difference in communication with especially German. People prefer indirect way, and people are not good at the discussion, so they prefer exchange of information on email basis, and they have internal discussion and then make a decision. So it's very difficult for you to get involved in the discussion with your Japan customers. And this is a comparison, low context culture versus high context culture. So high context means important informations are between the lines. So Japan is here, so most Japanese prefer speaking vague language. They suggest some implicit way, and they don't like a direct way. However, you guys are at the opposite end. So you guys are super logical, rational, and open, direct. So I love German culture because it's easy to understand what you really guys want to do that. However, for Japanese, it's easy to understand what Germans think, but for German, it's difficult to understand what Japanese think. So this is a problem. In addition to that, most Japanese people usually try to avoid a conflict, especially with a foreigner in the foreign language. So if you ask a question like, are you interested in our products? Most of the Japanese say yes in front of you. Their answers are always positive. However, they may ignore your following up emails. So it's very tricky. Japanese just wanted to avoid a conflict in front of you on the spot. So this is the reason why they would say yes. And this is about customer relationship. I believe the relationship between OEM and the supplier is equal in Europe, but in Japan, it's not. Usually, supply chain is dominated by a large manufacturer like Toyota, and Toyota usually controls their group distributors and tier 1, tier 2 suppliers. Sometimes Toyota send people to the factory of tier 1 and tier 2 in order to reduce production costs. So this is a relationship between the customer and the supplier. So it's not equal at all. So usually a buyer is very strong than a seller. So in front of you, Japanese business people are very polite and kind. But in their mind, they are somewhat arrogant because they are buyer and you are a seller. And in the past, Honda Tier 1 supplier is not allowed to have a deal with Toyota. Now, Honda and Nissan announced they terminated this type of exclusive supply chain system. However, the culture still exists. And Toyota still has this exclusive supply chain network. So it's very tough to enter the business with Toyota. And another difficulty is quality requirements. This is a good example. This is the specification provided by a European company or a German company to our Chinese factory for the case of outsourcing of manufacturing. This is the type of products. So very simple specification. However, the Japanese way is somewhat different. Please see, two products are almost same. However, the way of making specification in Japan is cringy. Most Japanese people love micromanagement because they are perfectionists. Remember, if we make a mistake, we have to commit a suicide, harakiri. Of course, I'm joking, but our mentality is like that. So I know most of German engineers don't like this. So the most important role of international manager who covers Japan is persuading your engineers to adapt to the Japanese culture in terms of quality things. Okay, I believe now you have studied the Japan economy and business culture and typical entry barriers in marketing and sales. And now I'd like to explain some strategic options of market entry. So I know that the ideal way is you just find a distributor and your distributor sells your products semi-automatically. That's why you have nothing to do. So I believe this is the ideal case. However, it usually doesn't happen, unfortunately. The background is our industry life cycle. Sometimes American or European companies say, our strategy is working very well in India, China, Indonesia, Malaysia. So I believe this strategy also works in Japan. But I have to say no. Or it was true when Japan was growing in 1970s or 80s. Yeah, Japan had a growing stage in 1970s and 80s. At the time, the economic situation or industrial situation was somewhat similar with the current emerging markets. However, Japan is a top runner of declining economy. In such case, distributors are not proactive searching new products because the market is shrinking. Distributors in those countries are very keen to develop new products in order to meet the growing demand in their local market. But in Japan, opposite is happening. Many distributors are reducing the number of suppliers and inventory in order to save costs because the market is shrinking. And the oligopoly usually has happened. In other words, some sectors are dominated by limited number of strong players. So local distributors have no intention to invest in such a oligopoly market on behalf of you. This is the reason why it's very difficult to find a proactive distributor in Japan. Of course, in some growing sector like medtech, IoT, or alternative energy, you may be able to find a very entrepreneurial distributor in Japan, but in general, Japanese distributors are very passive. So another problem of distribution in Japan is here. You can find it in this case study. This is a engine filter supplier's case. They like to sell to construction machinery and other commercial vehicles. And they had a meeting with a big distributor, and they believed, they can sell their products through this guy to end users. However, the reality is like this. In some industries like automotive, construction machinery, distributors don't try to sell your products because their main role is on delivery, just-in-time delivery. They usually have a warehouse near the factory of end user, and they, manage delivery of hundreds or thousands of parts. In such case, there's no big difference. They purchase from you or from your competitors because the price will be almost same and the profit will be almost same. So this guy is happy as far as end user A is happy with the components or parts. So that's why this distributor doesn't make any efforts to promote your products. Only one way to get sales from end user A is you do sales directly end user A. Then after making an agreement with the end user, you can talk to distributor. Hey, we made an agreement with our customer and please distribute our products. So this is the right way to develop your end users in Japan in some sectors like automotive or construction machinery. So in this case, you should not expect your Japan distributor sells your products. So this is the theory or framework of comparing market entry options. So trade is here. Of course, risk is low. However, control is also low because your distributor works for their own interests. They don't represent you. There might be always a conflict between you and your local distributor. So your sales in Japan hit the ceiling sooner or later. Another way is a direct investment. You set up your own subsidiary in Japan and you hire local talents. It requires a quarter to €500,000 in the first year, maybe without sales revenue. Risk is high, however, you can get the full control. So this is our extreme options. And in between, you can find collaborations, licensing, joint venture, M&A, but it has another trouble because Japan is notorious with slow decision making. So once you have chosen this strategy, it may take a year, a few years, or more. So it's somewhat frustrating to you. So we usually recommend another option here. I will explain this nice option later in some other case studies. So again, being successful through a local distributor is the ideal situation. And having a local distributor has some advantages like this. You can easily get market experience through them. And of course, low investment, low risk, and hope-free. You can take advantage of their existing customer base. However, there are a lot of disadvantages like this. No customer relationship. It's very difficult to have a deep technical discussion through a distributor. You can get the market information because our distributor usually tries to hide some important information, including the contact information of a key person. And there's no perfect distributor. Your distributor may just cover one of your target industries, and you can't control their sales activities and user pricing. So the worst disadvantage is you never know the reason in the case your business doesn't grow in Japan, because they don't share the real reason with you. So I would like to explain some case studies about another option to develop your customers in Japan. Before explaining some case studies, I will tell you, you should not spend your time and money on market research if you are selling industrial goods. For consumer goods, market research somewhat works well, like a focus group interview or home use test to understand the consumer preference. However, market research for industrial goods is like scratching the surface of the market because you have to meet key engineers and give your offer and interactive technical discussion in order to understand their demand and needs. Otherwise, they will give you some positive ideas. As I said, if you ask some questions, they say, yes, good, your products seem good. So that kind of market research doesn't work. So that's why I always recommend test marketing. You do some sales activities in Japan in order to meet key engineers in your target organization and have a technical discussion, and then you can understand the real marketability. So this is our suggestion. You do test marketing on outsourcing basis, and then you establish your sales strategy based on the information you collect from your target customers. I think this is the smartest way to enter the Japanese market. So this is the first case. This is a supplier of components for some plant equipment, mainly in oil and gas industry. You can find what we did. We started working on marketing and sales on behalf of this client. Of course, we got the product training. We translated all the marketing material, and we identify potential customers and visit them, have a technical discussion. I think it's very simple. It's a normal marketing and sales activities, and we found the challenges. It is a voltage issue. Japan has a strange voltage standard, which is different from other parts of the world. And the client found they have to invest $1 million for changing their production line. And we also found a very strong local competitor, which has advantages in both quality and price. So it's not promising at all, right? However, we found a way. The strategy was like this. This is a client in Germany, and this is customers in Japan. Here, Germany, Japan, and they focus on the Japanese customers, which export to Middle East and Southeast Asia. So in this case, Japanese voltage standard is nothing because the final products are used in foreign countries. At the same time, our client has a very strong maintenance network in such areas, Middle East and Southeast Asia. That's why many Japanese companies were convinced to use our client products. Finally, they increased their sales revenue in Japan, and then made the decision to send an expat who speaks Japanese fluently to Japan, and at the same time started their partner search for finding potential opportunities of M&A. What they did is like they hire our firm as a sales rep, so they pay some several thousand euros per month. So it's a somewhat small risk, but they get the high control because they pay professional fees on the retainer base. So that's why we have to report everything, including contact information, pricing, everything. So after we started working with the client got all the information of the market. And at the same time, we established our strategy together with the client, and they are happy with that. And finally, they made a decision to terminate the partnership with us. It was somewhat sad, they stopped the contract with us, and they hired they sent an expert to Japan without direct investment. Maybe he is based in Korea and made a business trip a few times a month. So they haven't registered their own subsidiary in Japan, but the Korean guy often come to Japan and have business discussion with Japanese customers. At the same time, they started their partner search for future M&A opportunities. So this is what they did for Japan, and they have been very successful. And we are really proud of their success. And we usually call this situation graduation. I mean, it's like a graduation of our children. It's somewhat sad, but at the same time, we are proud of their success. This is another case. What they did is same. And the challenges are they are making many products, and they are selling to many industries. And their distributor had no idea where their target segment. That's why we visited many companies and found some target segment like this. And then their local Japanese distributor started focusing on their target segments, and the company has been very successful in Japan. And at the same time, they had many chances to deliver to China. Japanese companies located there. So what they did is almost same. Here, they hired our firm as a sales rep in Japan, and we developed a great distributor with a good fit. And then, again, they terminated the contract with us. Happy graduation. They were working together with us for 8 to 9 years, and finally, they established a good business in Japan. We are really proud of their success as well. So this is the last slide. I would like to say, you should not waste your money for research and consulting, but I recommend test marketing and strategy planning at the same time. And test marketing should include sales and pre and post technical discussion in order to get the real demand from key engineers of your target organizations. And then you can take the next step if you've been successful in Japan. So this is our overview of our service. Our strength is here, business development. But at the same time, we are happy to work for you at the very beginning of market entry, like market research, regulation research, and then we can help FDI, M&A, recruitment. So this is end of my presentation. So I'd like to say thank you for your participation to our Japan webinar today, and I hope you get some new ideas how to be successful in Japan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hasegawa, for the very insightful presentation as well. Also, from my point of view as a Korean, I can totally agree with all the cultural aspects. Okay, then I would say without further ado, let's start with the Q&A session.
Yep.
Okay, so I received a few questions. The first one would be, how is the effect of COVID on the Japanese market?
Okay, I think now everything has been back to normal, except for food service industries or hospitality industries. Some service industries are still struggling with the limited number of tourists, especially from foreign countries, because now Japan is criticized by foreign countries because only business people are allowed to enter Japan. So that's why such kind of service industries are still struggling. However, other industries are doing well, recovering.
Okay, then the second question I received is, how much budget do we actually need for setting up our own office in Japan?
Of course, it depends on the type of person you prefer hiring. For example, if you like to hire a bilingual senior level sales manager with a technical background and one assistant of sales and administrative things, and you have your own office in the center of Tokyo, probably you have to pay close to €500,000 in the first year. Probably it will be between quarter and $500,000. So the problem is, in some industries, it takes a few years at least to get the first sales, like in automotive industry, because their new product development cycle is for 3 years. So they usually don't replace existing parts for existing models. So what you can do is to identify new product development projects. So that's why you have to pay €500,000 for 3 years without sales revenue. That's why we don't recommend setting up your own office at the very beginning of your market entry.
Okay. Then the next question is, are you interested in a collaboration between Switzerland and Japan?
Yes, we have some clients from Switzerland, and also we sometimes work for the Swiss embassy in Tokyo. And yeah, we are very happy to work with Swiss companies. Okay. Probably I can name one, Leap Health. I think it's a big company. We are working for one of their business unit.
Okay. Then one more question I got is it a good idea to try to find an agent working on a commission base in Japan?
It's super difficult because the labor culture here is super conservative because people are risk averse. And the ideal career for young people is to keep working for the same employer for 40 years, like for Toyota, Mitsubishi, Sumitomo. So good people, good talent usually work for such big companies for a few decades. So I believe most of individual sales agent is not a high performer. And basically, it's very difficult to find because the total number is quite limited.
Okay. So I would say time is up. If any of the participants have more questions, you can send them to me, and then I will ask you, Mr. Hasegawa, afterwards. Okay.
Pleasure. Ja.
Then thank you very much. Und genau, nochmal auf Deutsch. Ich bedanke mich herzlich für Ihr Interesse beim heutigen Webinar. Und genau, wie bereits erwähnt, sollten Sie Interesse nochmal an der Aufzeichnung haben, können Sie mir gerne einmal kurz eine Mail schicken. Dann schicke ich Ihnen die Aufzeichnung des Webinars zu. Und genau, dann würde ich sagen, alles Gute und eine schöne Woche noch.
Finished?
Yes.